Let's go live now to the Shadow Energy and Climate Minister, Ted O'Brien. Ted O'Brien joining us from the beautiful Maroochydore markets. I'm sure it's a wonderful atmosphere there. I wouldn't mind being there myself today. But let's start with some breaking news, Ted O'Brien, if I can. I've just noticed via Donald Trump's social media account, he's just announced his energy secretary. Chris Wright is his name. He's the founder of an oil field services firm based in Denver. And Mr. Wright just last year said, there is no climate crisis. We're not in the midst of an energy transition either. So what sort of implication does that appointment and Trump's broader agenda have for the international climate talks as you see it?
Good morning, Kieran, and I am indeed showing off by being here down at Maroochydore. I hope people are jealous about the best part of Australia. Look, the announcement that you've just mentioned is new news, and so I can't really comment very specifically about the appointment, other than to say that from the Coalition's perspective, we have proven to be able to work with either side of the political side of the United States. That'll be the same when it comes to the Trump administration. There's no doubt that the world right now, including here in Australia, are looking at the election that's just taken place and asking questions, what does this mean? From the Coalition's perspective, our sole focus when it comes to climate change and energy policy has been what's in our national interest. And given that, we ourselves don't see our policy settings change as we move into this next election. We have a track record as a coalition. Even the last term of government alone, we were able to get prices down, we were able to get emissions down and keep the lights on. We've seen under the Albanese government the polar opposite. Australians are now paying among the highest prices in the world. Emissions have been going up since Labor came to office. And the market operator is saying the lights might go out. And so we look forward to hearing more about the new Trump administration, but we are supremely confident about our own policy settings and our ability to work with the new team in the US.
Some of your colleagues, Matt Canavan, Lou O'Brien, Michelle Landry, they're saying that we should follow his lead on this. Why are you not on the same page as them when it comes to things like the Paris Agreement or in terms of fossil fuel use and so on?
When it comes to our position as a coalition, Kieran, we are taking an all-of-the-above approach. We believe in a balanced energy mix. And that means today we have our baseload power being supplied by coal-fired power stations. We have renewables and gas. They're the three primary sources of energy. As we move forward, our policy is to continue with renewables, to pour more gas into the system, and as coal retires from the system, to replace it with another 24/7 baseload power source, that being zero emissions nuclear energy. If you look at the United States, indeed the US itself is doubling down on nuclear energy. Both sides of Congress are united on the importance of having nuclear as part of a balanced energy mix. That's how they're getting prices down. Indeed, the Department of Energy of the United States recently came out with a report that compared the cost of a renewables-only grid, which is like the one Labor wants in Australia, to a grid that is renewables plus nuclear. And the renewables plus nuclear grid ends up being 37% cheaper. So we are learning from the United States. As a coalition, we are united around the importance of including nuclear in the mix, and that unity will continue.
Is it, but just on the net zero thing, because the colleagues, some of your colleagues are saying it's economic suicide. Why do it if Donald Trump has turned the whole thing on its head anyway?
Well, look, you can't blame, Kieran, people looking at the approach that the Albanese government is taking for a net zero electricity grid, for example, and saying it is economic suicide. I mean, we revealed on Friday last week over $500 billion of hidden costs that the Albanese government has not revealed to the Australian people. I mean, this is scandalous stuff. This is the biggest con job ever attempted on the Australian people. I mean, we've had, the Prime Minister doesn't know what's going on, right? So he's never actually been able to come up with a cost of his own plan. But we've had Chris Bowen claiming their plan for the national electricity market on the east coast of Australia will be $122 billion for transmission, storage and also generation. But we found out on Friday from Frontier Economics independent modelling that it's actually, he's left out over $500 billion. So you can't blame people right across Australia, whether they're politicians or not, looking at Labor's plan and saying, well, hang on. If that's the way we get to net zero, we are going to have Australia left poorer, weaker and dependent on foreign powers. But there is an alternate, and that alternate approach is the Coalition's balanced energy mix, which will leave Australia richer, stronger and fiercely independent. The economics of Labor's approach have now been laid bare last Friday, and before the end of the year we'll be releasing our own economics. Therefore, Australians can compare their alternate energy futures.
It sounds like you've got that number now, though. You've got that costing done, because the Frontier Economics report, it had the modelling of Labor's, but also your own. So that must be just around the corner. Yeah, we'll get the nuclear costings.
Kieran, it is just around the corner indeed. We have consistently said that we would release our economics before the end of this year. That continues to be the case.
Okay.
But what we've also been saying for the last 2.5 years is to Labor, what's your cost? And the only costing that we've heard from the Energy Minister, from Chris Bowen, is $122 billion. He's now been found out. It's a con job. He's left out $500 billion. That's over 5 times more.
But just to clarify, though, that's the AIMO number. When you look up the Integrated Services Program, that's the AIMO estimate, isn't it? So would you work with AIMO in government, or do you think that they're discredited because of that number that you argue is wrong?
I will have no problem working with AIMO and other bodies, but we also need to be very upfront and honest with the Australian people. I asked the boss of AIMO only 3 weeks ago in a hearing, a parliamentary hearing, what is the real cost of the plan to get to net zero on the electricity grid by 2050? Didn't know. So there are problems, there's no doubt. Will we be able to work with them? Sure. But actually just having a little bit of honesty in the debate, I think, would help, Kieran. And this is all we've been asking for from the Albanese government. And Frontier Economics now, at least, has given the Australian people the honesty of Albanese's plan. It's proven they've missed out on over $500 billion. They'll soon see our plan, and at least then the Australian people can be informed about those two alternates.
Given the massive take-up of solar in Australia, including in your backyard and on the Sunshine Coast, right around Australia, in fact, how do you see nuclear working alongside the solar take-up? Because some analysts, including those that support nuclear, are saying that basically when nuclear is up and running, you'd have to switch off a lot of the household solar.
What we've been doing is learning, Kieran, from overseas. And the electricity grids that are most successful in terms of their efficiency, their reliability, their costs and their emissions actually have renewables like solar working together with zero emissions nuclear energy. And this is the whole point of the Coalition's approach. It's to say, let's not be ideological on technologies. Let's just make sure the engineering, the economics do the talking. And we've learned from overseas, and we've taken those lessons back here to Australia, and what we see, and we'll release more about this over the months ahead, is that when you have renewables working together with nuclear energy, then costs come down, the lights stay on, you get emissions down. It's been working around the world. Engineering and physics won't be any different in Australia than what it is overseas.
You wouldn't have to switch, so you wouldn't have to, because as I said, some advocates of nuclear do make the point that with household solar being such a saturated part of the market, that you might have to turn some of that off. Is that the case?
I think there's truth to the fact that today, regardless of whether there's any nuclear at all in the system, it is the case today that we have so much solar in the system. it can all saturate the grid at the same time of the day when the sun comes out. And we've been very clear that our approach from a coalition's perspective is to look at storage as a key priority. We believe that Australia needs to continue with solar, especially rooftop solar. You know, under the coalition, we achieved the highest penetration in the world of rooftop solar. That's a good thing. But the more and more that comes on, it saturates the grid at the same time of the day. And therefore, you almost need to sort of time shift that, and the best way to do that is through storage solutions. And again, we'll have more to say about that in our policies in due course.
I've got to let you go and enjoy some of the produce of God's country up there on the Sunshine Coast, but I want to ask you quickly, the Acting Prime Minister spoke to me this morning and he said, Richard Marles, that COP31, that hosting a Pacific climate talks with the Pacific is in his words, he said it's a big statement in terms of our relationship with them. And in a strategic sense, he was making the point because of China's efforts to influence the Pacific. Is this part of your thinking when you look at the government's proposal to host a climate summit alongside the Pacific neighbours? Will that factor into your thinking?
Kieran, our priority is to get costs down for everyday Australian households and businesses, to be honest. That's our priority. It's Labor's priority to host a global climate change summit. Three things Labor should do. Tell the Australian people if they want to host the climate change summit, what commitments are they making? 2, how much will it cost? 3, who do they expect to pay? I think the starting point for me will be for Labor to answer those questions. As I've just laid out on their electricity plan, they have dishonestly hidden the real costs from the Australian people. So when it comes to their ambitions to host COP, just be upfront, just be honest. So all Australians, including the opposition, can see the truth behind their plan, not the motherhood statements, not the motherhood statements. They're very good at that stuff. But the motherhood statements don't hit your power bill. Real costs do. So the Australian people deserve to know the truth. And I think that would be the starting point when it comes to their plans for COP2.
Shadow Energy and Climate Minister Ted O'Brien joining us today. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Kieran. All the best.